Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on when this finds you. Hope you had a great day, having a great day, or plan on having a great day. Just want to talk a little bit. Like I said in the last video, I see and hear things and it triggers thoughts in my head, and that can be good or bad. I want to talk a little bit about something today, especially with everything that's going on in society and based on the things I think are going to happen faster than we anticipate. Because people are struggling and they need to know why, other than, jobs, laying off people and things like that. It's much deeper than that. But I plan on just kind of talking about it a little bit of that here. Don't know how long I'm going to talk. I want to talk about how school and work correlates to everything that we're seeing in society, that we're dealing with society. And if we're not dealing with it, we know somebody in our family or friends who's dealing with it. And sadly, propaganda has been in place, and most people just have no clue why they are in the predicament that they're in. And so if do me a favor and click like on the video, but and share it. If you feel it in your heart, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't, because that's the only way the message is going to get out on this platform. Because they're not going to promote it. But anyway, but there's a factory that's been running nonstop for about 122, 123 years. It doesn't produce anything but obedience. It's called school. But in reality, it's actually worse than that. As soon as mothers get over their pregnancy, they send their children to a daycare. Some are fortunate to have mothers or mothers-in-laws who can take over those duties, but they have to do that in order for them to go into work. And from daycare, they send them to preschool. And then from preschool, pre-K3, pre-K4, it's amazing how they keep getting younger and younger on the pre-Ks. And we send them to school to start kindergarten. And then after high school, we go to college or the military. And see, the greatest part of all of our lives as children has been spent being taught and shaped by total strangers, and we wonder why we have the problems in society that we do. And now, this is the craziest thing to me. It seemed normal when I was a child, and probably when you were a child as well, because we didn't know any better. But we have to ask permission to do anything that was naturally placed in us by Father Yahuwah. Using the bathroom, we have to ask permission that the body requires to sustain itself. Eat. We have to ask permission. Get sunlight and fresh air. They call it recess. We have to ask permission or wait on a teacher to tell us we can go. We have to get permission to go home at the end of the day. They call it dismissal. We have to raise our hands if we want permission to speak. We are not allowed to actually talk in cafeterias with other children in elementary school unless we get permission. We are humiliated in one form or another if we question what's being taught or don't have a proper understanding. We're taught to fit in within a prefabricated box by school teachers who have been fit inside of a prefabricated box. We have to get permission if we need to call our parents. I remember back when I was in 5th grade, I lost my house keys one day on the way home. I didn't know where I lost them. Me and my sister were walking home. And so, I didn't realize I had lost them until I actually got home. And by me being the oldest, my younger sister didn't have keys at the time. So, we had to sit outside. And the next day, my teacher sent me to the office to get something for her. And my keys were actually on the counter. And since I was in the office already, I told the ladies in the office those were my house keys. And they asked me a few questions and then realized I was telling the truth. And when I got back to class with my naive self, I actually let my teacher know that someone had turned in my house keys to the front office. Guess what? She fussed at me because she didn't give me permission to get my house keys because she sent me to the office for something else. Now, I did what she asked me to do, but apparently I was supposed to go back to class and ask for her permission to go right back to the office to get my house keys. That didn't make logical or common sense to me. See, school is the first time in life we're taught to compete with each other instead of create with each other. For 13 years, we've been conditioned to ask permission for life. For 13 years, strangers tell us what we're allowed to do. For 13 years, strangers tell us what activities and trips we can participate in. For 13 years, we cannot opt out of the system. For 13 years, we've been chastised for challenging what we are being taught. You know, we get ridiculed for not making good grades. For 13 years, we are steered toward a debt creation program called college so we can start our adult lives behind financial zero. And then we promote the same broken thought process to our offspring. I remember years ago, this is probably back in the 90s, interview with former Temple University basketball coach John Chaney. And John Chaney was never one to mince words. And he told an interviewer, people have forgotten what the purpose of college really is. He said, college is just a place for you to go until you can better your situation in life. He said, if a company came and offered you $2 million to study ants, he said, you would be stupid to say, well, I got 2 more years left on my degree plan before I can graduate. He said, you better go say hell with that degree and go study ants. And if we're not steered toward college because, they did a masterful job removing trades, auto mechanics, wood shop, metal shop, drafting, and all these other things, plumbing, electric, they did a masterful job removing all of these things. But if you're not steered toward college, you don't see yourself going to school later, then they'll start try to steer you toward the military. So, although they took all the trades out of school, they left ROTC. Isn't that amazing? They're steering us toward destroying other people of other countries that have been labeled as a threat to us, although we've never had any interaction with any of them personally. They've never done anything to us. That's why they got so mad at Muhammad Ali when he said, ain't no Vietnamese ever did nothing to me. I'm not going to fight in your wars. That's y'all issue. Isn't it amazing, like I said, that they removed all the trades out of the schools that taught people how to be business owners to a degree, but they kept ROTC programs in schools so they can have a steady influx of people joining the military industrial complex. See, the only difference between past slavery and modern slavery is the chains are invisible today. We get up, we get dressed to work for a boss who tells us what to do, and he lets us go home to return the next day. So you end up replacing your desires and your will to be subservient to another man. It negates our freedom and autonomy in the name of professionalism. See, you give your best years to somebody else. You work long hours. You drive in oppressive traffic commutes daily. You compromise your health for them to turn around and kick you out around age 65, 70, and now they kicking you out long before then now, to live the rest of your life, of your years of your life beaten down, in pain, popping prescription meds to manage the health problems the job caused you for 40 to 45 years. And you don't have to stay on the same job. It's just the system, 40 to 45 years. Because nobody, if people stay on jobs 10 years now, they doing good. You can't even see that in education anymore. People thought that was secure. People thought nursing was secure. You're not even seeing that. You're seeing people opt out of those systems quick. See, the school system tells us to fit in. And then the employment system tells us what fitting in is worth. Work hard in school and on the job, and you'll succeed, and you'll make it is the largest lie that's ever been promoted to us. Some of you say, man, I make 6 figures. Do you have to report to somebody else every day to earn it? I remember hearing a guy, bragging he's an attorney out of Louisiana, telling this multimillionaire, he didn't know the dude was a multimillionaire at the time. I make $350,000 a year. And the multimillionaire asks and say, man, why does it take you a whole year to make it? See, the multimillionaire was in business for himself. He wasn't anybody's employee. Hey, so do you have to report to somebody else every day to earn your six figures? Myron, I made good grades in school. Did you make good grades by doing what the teacher said and what the books told you to do and what the book said were true? Or did you make good grades using your own mind? I mean, you wake up every morning to report to school or you'll be suspended and held back. You wake up every morning and report to work or you'll be fired or kept from promotions. Neither one of those situations are voluntary. Not if you want to advance in this society. The school system doesn't allow you to rest. After being locked up in four walls, and a lot of the schools nowadays don't even have windows anymore. Is that not like prison? They have no windows in a lot of these modern classrooms now. Zero windows. So it's nothing more than a walled-in concentration camp. So after being locked up for a minimum of 8 hours a day, they send you home with more work, called homework. Then the job doesn't allow you to rest either. You work a minimum of 8 hours. Sometimes they allow you to work 10, 12, 14, 16 hours because 8 isn't enough. I remember one time I worked 27 hours straight. Years ago. 27 straight hours. So when they allow you to work them extra hours, what they're doing is saying you have homework. See, we only get to rest when a teacher or the boss gives us permission to rest. I know in elementary school, I hated my teachers that gave us homework over, Thanksgiving holidays, Christmas holidays, and spring break. I hated them. You're not allowing us to have any fun. And then, of course, they didn't give us homework over the summer, but then the school system down here started promoting reading programs during the summer. And then you had to report to your teachers what books you read over the summer and all this other foolishness. Them teachers, I know they have some professional development days and all that stuff during the summer, but they're not allowing us to be children at all. They're controlling us 12 months out of the year, just like our jobs are controlling us 12 months out of the year. We only get to rest when a teacher or the boss gives us permission to rest. One job I was a manager on didn't allow the manager to take vacation time from June to September. Kind of sounds like being in school. You know why we couldn't take vacation from June to September? Because that was back to school and we were a large retail outlet, nationwide retail outlet that did major business during school time, back to school time. So we couldn't take vacation from June to September. Guess when most people want to go on vacation? June to September. And then we couldn't take vacation time from November to February because we're a big store that did a lot of business during tax time. So we couldn't take vacation during that time. Look how many months are left for us to be able to enjoy our off time. They call it paid vacation. They're not paying you to go on vacation. They paying you what you would have earned if you would have been there. They ain't giving you no extra money. And once you get rest away from both systems, if you spend time with yourself, it is only then many, not all, because most people want to stay ignorant, but you'll realize how much of self has been destroyed by the system. See, slavery today is more sophisticated. The chains are invisible. The whip is invisible. The control is subtle. See, freedom is non-existent in this system. You can't buy freedom. School teachers give us assigned seating, telling us where we'll sit for an entire year. The boss gives you assigned seating, telling you where you will sit at work for the entire time you work there. See, slavery, described as freedom, is one of the greatest manipulation tactics ever sold us. We're not free as long as we keep selling our life to the very people who own the means of production. We're not allowed to question teachers. We're not allowed to question bosses. We're not allowed to question pastors. Yet we say we are free to choose. You're not even allowed to basically choose the person you want to vote for. They give you two choices. It's like Pepsi or Coke. Pepsi and Coke ain't all the colas out there, but those are the only two choices they offer you. Democrat and Republican are the only two choices they offer you. But that's not all that's available. You are given the illusion of freedom. How can we choose when we can't even ask the right question? How are we free to choose when someone else has laid out the plan for our entire lives before we even born? As children, are we able to tell our parents we ain't going to school? No. Why? Because all of our parents were enslaved into the same system. They encouraged us to be a part of, become a part of. See, what's the ultimate goal? To make sure you never know who you are and whose you are. We need an alarm to shock us awake in order to go into forced labor camps called school or work. What's different than slavery? Our body has an internal clock that wakes us every morning when it's ready to wake us up. The reason we need alarm clocks is because the body is alarmed when we force it to do something it's not ready to do. See, if school was fun, we would gladly jump out of bed every morning. I remember my algebra teacher, Algebra 1 teacher in high school. She said something about homework, the problem I got wrong doing homework. I said, I literally told her, I wasn't thinking about your homework when I got out of class Friday. I was thinking about my football game Friday night. Well, football ain't that important. It's algebra is. I said, well, I wasn't thinking about algebra. But school was never enjoyable to me. All of my extracurricular activities was the only enjoyment I got out of school. Football, wood shop, things like that. That's what I enjoyed. I didn't enjoy schoolwork. I thought it was useless, in all honesty. My mama taught me how to count. My mama taught me how to read. What I need a school for? I don't need to know the Pythagorean theorem. I don't care how many O-rings the space shuttle have. I don't care about that. I don't care what temperature water boils. I just want to water the boil. See, if work was enjoyable, we would jump out of bed every morning automatically. We have to be forced to do something we were never geared to do. We have more degrees than ever, but we are less educated. If you talk to most people with degrees, there's an air of superiority in their tone. People ask you where you work to determine what level of respect you deserve. They ask you where you live to try and determine if you're on the same footing with them financially. These type of people have poor self-images, low self-esteem, and low self-worth that they believe pieces of paper or certain zip codes can erase. It can't. In school, we get progress reports and report cards that determine our learning capacity in a scripted system. On the job, we get performance reviews to determine our ability to follow orders in a scripted system. I remember one year on the job, I got a performance review. 6 years on the job, they never gave me a review. 6 years. But they asked me to go all over the country and cover territories for them. And I willingly did it because, I've always been a team player. Willingly did it. 6 years, no performance review. 6 years, no raise. 7th year come, they finally give me a performance review. Finally give me a raise. No issues nowhere up until that point. Every metric I got exceeds expectations except one. Can you guess what that one was? I got meets expectations in the area of authority with some notes attached to it. Myron challenges authority too much and just needs to do what's asked of him without question. Without question. And our partner, we don't do that over here. See, I've always been a hard worker. However, I've always worked harder to be a smart worker. People get jealous when they see that they work hard and you know how to be more efficient and smart with the way you do your things. And so people started complaining that I was working too fast, but my work was better than everybody else, but I was working too fast. It wasn't taking me the amount of time that it took everybody else to do the work because I learned how to be efficient. See, report cards and performance reviews are nothing more than a measuring stick to see how you compete with others. So you remember what I said earlier? We were not put on earth to compete with each other. We were put on earth to create with each other. Good friend of mine, talked to me yesterday, and she actually told me, and she and her family have totally got back into that Bible, and getting back to our Hebrew heritage and culture and all that. And she was we were talking yesterday, and she was saying, she told her son, teenage son, he has to stop playing football because football games take place on the Sabbath, and we're supposed to be resting on the Sabbath. And since football, basketball use pig skin leather, we're not even supposed to be touching pork. And so, we had a long discussion, but I'm not going to get into all that. But we're not supposed to be even competing with each other on any level. We're supposed to be creating with each other. And see, in the words of John Rockefeller, competition is a sin. And I ain't singing no praises for John Rockefeller, trust me. White people do enough of that already. But his words are truer than most people know. His idea was to destroy anyone else who offered a product that competed with him, so he created a monopoly. Practically every oil company is a child of Standard Oil. Rockefeller wasn't speaking from a biblical perspective. The world was a better place when our ancestors had trades. It didn't get better when we got degrees. In those days gone by, money circulated within each community, empowering each community before it ever left multiple times. Everybody with a trade touched that money at some point. Now our money empowers big corporations in enriching and enhancing the lives of about 5 families who live by Rockefeller's words. Competition is a sin. We need to stop measuring academic success by degrees. They mean nothing anymore. I mean, they mean something to the people that go and earn them. But in the big scheme of things, in the grand scheme of things, ain't got nothing to do with your economics. Look at all these degree people unemployed right now. Stop measuring economic success by your salary in neighborhood. They mean nothing. See, we make our loved ones sacrifice for us to work hard for the system. We negate our families. We stress ourselves out to meet standards of people who have no true foundation, no biblical foundation, no family foundation at all. And they negate their families. So we negate our families. When I back on one of the jobs when I was a manager, we had a district manager. He wanted us to work. He said 5.5 days a week. And I talked to him. I said, hey, man, ain't no such thing as 5.5 days. He said, yeah, you just go in. Because managers were scheduled for a minimum 10 hours a day. He said, yeah, you just have to go in for 5 hours. I said, that ain't no half day. I said, if I got to get up, get dressed, get showered, drive the same miles to and fro, I said, most of my day is gone anyway. But see, this was a guy who had been divorced 3 times because he worked too much. So guess what he felt about the rest of us? Since he worked all the time, he wanted all of us to work like he did, and he didn't care about our relationships. See, school never taught us or allowed us to truly express ourselves and share our thoughts. It never allowed us to think. It told us what to obey, what to think. And then we were ridiculed if we didn't obey and think like the other robots in class. We may not be sick, but most of society isn't well. When's the last time you truly felt alive? I mean, really felt alive. Most people go on vacation to rest. They'll go to a whole other country to rest. Is that what life is supposed to be like? I mean, when was the last time you really felt alive? Just think about it. See, many people have bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, and, some PhDs. And they're still living paycheck to paycheck. But it's actually worse than that. Lots of people can't even afford living between paychecks without charging something on the credit card. I just saw a young lady yesterday, matter of fact, said she spent 10 years getting her degrees in college because that's what they told her to have a better life. And she said after she paid rent, she had $47 left in her bank account to last until the next paycheck. So she said she's basically literally killing herself to pay rent. She's killing herself to pay rent. So put a roof over her head. And she said she can't even afford to do anything else. And see, instead of our parents and my parents, your parents, all other parents telling children the system is a failure, parents, for some reason, dig in harder for their children also follow the exact same pattern that hasn't worked for them. We can't win in an environment that was made for us to lose. We can't beat the system in a one-sided game they created and made the rules for us to abide by, but don't apply to them. I was reading something the other day about marriage. Like I said, I still read a lot. I just don't read as much as I used to, and I really need to get back on that. But I don't remember the exact numbers. But the study said those without degrees have marriages that last longer than two married people with degrees. Well, the study actually said educated and uneducated. But see, society has told us who's educated and who's not. And a lot of people with degrees have believed in the hype. In my opinion, I think the reason many married couples divorce more often is because of what I mentioned earlier: competition with each other. What I mean by that, a lot of times people with paper credentials try to one up each other. They do it at work, they do it with friends, they do it with people of other races, they do it with other cultures, they do it with siblings, and yes, they even do it with their spouse. More than any other relationship in our lives, the two married people should be working on creating with each other, not competing with each other. But this is the environment that the American system has created. And see, if we look back at when the public school system was created, we can see how wealth was destroyed. Now, what I mean, you see, after slavery had ended, especially for black people, multitude of blacks had successful farming enterprises, even though, you know, old president, took back that 40 acres over in Georgia that General William Sherman had promised black people. We still had a lot of successful farming enterprises, which could then be passed on to children and grandchildren. And see, we got rid of income producing asset for pieces of paper because we didn't like the form because it reminded us too much of slavery. Like, you don't think what we're doing today remind you of slavery? We don't place importance on trades like plumbing, electricians, mechanics, or roofers because they aren't sexy. Try living without any of them. We just had to have HVAC tech come out, after the fifth time they finally figured out what was wrong with our unit. Our unit had been cutting off in the heat of the day several times a day. And we just had to leave it off for hours at a time because it was causing issues, and it just shut off. It would cut on outside, but it wouldn't even blow in the house. And come to find out, last year when Beryl hit, they had to go inside the unit. Beryl sat over our area for about 4 hours just blowing wind at 80 plus miles an hour. And part of our house, because of the way our house is made, wind blew all the insulation in the attic to one side of the house. And come to find out, it's finally caught up. It was all inside the AC unit and had clogged up the unit where it couldn't blow. And I was telling my wife, even when the air was blowing, I said, it's hardly blowing anything. It was taking forever to cool the house down. And like I said, HVAC techs were having trouble figuring it out. And they finally found it the other day. So, but try to live, especially in a place like Houston, Texas, without an HVAC tech. So try to live without them. Y'all think doctors are important. Y'all think lawyers are important. Try to live without these basic necessities. You don't need a doctor every day. Because you're not going to the hospital every day. You're not going to the clinic every day. But you want that AC to blow every day. You want to turn your tap on. You want to turn that shower head on, and you want that water to flow every day. You let that power go out. You want that electric. You want to be able to plug in your TV, your phones, and your refrigerator and all that every day. You don't want that water to bag up in that toilet or in your sink or anything every day. You want to be able to get in your car and crank it every day. My car's been sitting parked in the driveway for almost 4 years because I hadn't been able to drive it. But I got a mechanic. It's just a matter of, getting back to the point of, me being able to drive again. But, I got a mechanic. That mechanic's important to me. So try living without those people. You see, the same people you run to work for in order to feed your family can also be the same people that can stop paying you, therefore stop feeding your family. Side note, speaking of eating, look at what they sell us as food today. Because we turned over farming and gardening to big agriculture. We get to live longer now, but we get to live with compromised health. The system grooms us to obey the system. The system grooms us to work for the system. The system grooms us to eat from the system. And then the system grooms us to manage and all of our health problems. The system created with solutions from the system. We allow the system convince us that made up pieces of paper were a greater asset than having something we actually own that produced income. See, I can't speak for any of you, but I was constantly told to get my degree instead of starting a business because most businesses fail. And look at society today. How many people with degrees are unemployed? It's over, last figure I saw was over 53% of people with college degrees are looking for work. And they keep telling us, world's greatest economy, world's greatest society. We're doing better than everybody else. Why are we comparing ourselves to everybody else? We're struggling over here. Stop letting these people gaslight you and tell you people in this country living like this. You don't live in that country. You live here. I just saw something a few days ago. They talking about Houston, Texas is the worst major city in this country for people right now to live in because of the homeless epidemic and because of the economic situation. The biggest oil and gas hub in the whole country has the most homeless people out of any major city in the country. Something wrong with that. We got the most hungry people of any major city in the country. Something wrong with that. But they tell us degrees are the answer. But look at society today. And for many, there's no light at the end of the tunnel. I pray daily, that because I don't like to see people suffer. I want to see people be able to take care of themselves. But most people in society are going to have to change their mindset. That's the bottom line. I don't know what it's going to take for people to gather that. But like I said, I can't speak for any of you, but I was groomed constantly. Because I wanted to start my own cabinet making business. Y'all have heard me mention that before. And, when that kind of fell through and didn't work out like, my shop teacher and, the other folks trying to work, I said, well, I might as well, I'll go to school and get me a chemical engineering degree. But since I'm in school, I might well play football while I'm here. Because, like I said, I hated school. I don't like learning stuff that's not going to have any value on my life long after I get that piece of paper certifying that I can learn this stuff. I don't care about fragments. I mean, I know how to do fractions. I know how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide. I know how to read. I know how to comprehend. I don't need all that other stuff. I don't care about no Bunsen burner. I don't care about no test tubes. What value does that add to my life at this point? And see, what we did without realizing, we went to college to get streamlined into one specific area, which actually minimizes our value to society. And sadly, as black people, they wanted white system approval. So they ran away from business ownership as fast as they could, because it was the form or, seamstress, because black people had a lot of trades back then. It wasn't just women. We had a lot of trades back then. Go back and look at some of the patents that black people were given back in the late 1800s. We had a lot of trades. And guess what? Our families were a lot closer back then. See, most of us worked endless hours to pay bills and survive. See, when I met my wife, she actually had 2 jobs. And when I met her, I had a job, but I was doing furniture assembly on, when I got off in the afternoons, and on the weekends, I was DJing parties on Fridays and Saturdays, because I was always trying to do stuff to earn income. Since I've been married, now when we got married, I got my wife out of that second job before we got married. And, since we've been married, I've actually been in a situation where I've had to work two jobs at the same time. But I never stopped doing the furniture assembly and DJing parties up until years later. I just got tired of the party environment. I was never a big party animal anyway. I was DJing to make money. But that environment started getting to the point, I don't like being in no environment with all that fighting and stuff. So it's time for me to get that up. And, putting furniture together, that got old. I mean, I can still, do stuff for myself, but I don't want to go do it to earn income now. Bending down on your knees, driving all over different parts of the city, being in traffic, going to somebody and try to put something together, then realize they couldn't put it together, so they calling you to come do it, and then you get that 8 and broke parts and all that stuff. That got old. But see, the truth in all of this is that we spend the best years of our lives empowering, enhancing, and enriching other people. But because we have a few dollars to do a couple of things, we think we've made it because we have a little more than somebody else. And as I heard one guy say years ago, a resume is nothing more than a license to ask another man what you're worth. See, the form wasn't prestigious, but a piece of paper was. Look at everything our race of white acceptance caused us to lose. With the amount of student loan debt my Generation X is packing, somebody lied to us along the way. I got an article the other day. I had already seen some information about Gen X before I received the article, but the article just solidified everything I had already, saw right before then. But Gen X is packing debt. And they're saying, Gen X is basically, taking money. They actually owe more now than they did when they took out the initial loan with all interest and fees. And now they're looking at Gen X struggling to retire because of student loan debt. Was our goal to go get so educated that we spend our entire working life behind the financial 8-ball? Somebody lied to us along the way. How did we fall into this trap if it was so good for us? See, it was a trap that was set in place long before any of us were born. See, many people believe the plan to go get a degree to better your position in life, are finding out that it doesn't work because many people who were surveyed said they can't even afford a $1,000 emergency. Some of them said they can't even afford a $400 emergency. How is that possible in this land of opportunity? And yet, we are still promoting this system. The most recent figures show that 75% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. The entire system has failed us. The system isn't a failure. The system was designed to fail us. It's not the same thing. The system is not a failure. It was designed that way. The system isn't a failure. It was designed to fail us. See, the system has done a great job getting people to accept what they promote. This was more, and even say, and tell us what's good for us. This was no more evident in the years 2020 to 2023. All these so-called educated people want to call me crazy because I said, hey, won't you study this? Won't you look this stuff up? Won't you check before you start putting stuff in your body? But you know why most of them did it? Because they boss said you can't work until you do what the government said. That ain't freedom. And just like I said was going to happen when issues start popping up, government was going to come and say, we didn't say you had to do it. No, you said I had to do it if I wanted to stay employed. But see, if you're a business owner, you ain't got to abide by that. You ain't got to let nobody else control what can go into your system that's going to compromise your health. But they told me I was crazy. They put me down. They ridiculed me for saying what I said and standing on what I stood on. Hey, I've taken enough poison into my body going in these hospital visits. I don't need no extras. By 2027, digital ID is supposed to be implemented. Now, you got a lot of people out there think Donald Trump is just the great savior. He Fix it what Biden. Donald Trump and Joe Biden ain't nothing but two mirrors of each other with different party labels. Donald Trump just signed a couple of months ago, gave Palantir multi-billion-dollar contract to create the digital ID system for Americans. Y'all better look into this stuff. Donald Trump don't care about us. I've talked about some of the good things he did in his first term. His second term been a total train wreck. Based on people's behavior, they love to be controlled and they hate to be free. You know, slaves used to work all day with no pay and they got free food, water, and shelter. Today we work all day, we get paid, then we go spend the money that we earned on food, water, and shelter. So we basically giving the money right back to the descendants of the same people who enslaved our ancestors. We're still a slave society. The entire system has conditioned us to work at accumulating assets, well, not even assets, accumulating liabilities, and then judge each other's worth by their bank balance. Made me think about something right there. Because people, identify with their money. But if we use a hammer, we don't identify as a hammer. But if we earn a certain income, our entire self-image, esteem, worth is tied up in a salary. The income becomes our identity. The neighborhood becomes our identity. See, we get so busy trying to accumulate more and more. Okay, I want to earn $75,000. Oh, I want to earn $100,000. Ooh, is $150,000 possible before I retire? Before I hang my shoes up? See, in the process, we forget what life is really supposed to be about. Life is supposed to be about loving each other, living with each other, sharing with each other, looking out and caring for each other. See, we can trace this back to the talented tent mentality. The talented tent was supposed to be a group of Negroes that was supposed to, be the most educated. And they were supposed to go out in society and create new pathways for other blacks who didn't have the same opportunities to come up behind them and elevate themselves as well. And what they did, once they got theirs, they turned their backs on their brothers and sisters. Don't trust a Negro like that. And they started saying, I got mine, so you need to get yours. I ain't reaching my hand out to help you. And, as I heard long ago, money is an excellent servant, but a terrible master. There's not one organization in this country, not one business in this country, or one church in this country that doesn't have somewhere in their code of ethics, bylaws, values, that at somewhere in those words that force you to compromise in order to be a part of it for the sake of money. Some of the code of ethics, they're good. Some of the bylaws and the values that these companies stand on are not good. And that doesn't escape not one organization, business, or church in this country. Not one. You have to compromise to be part of these organizations for the sake of money. I remember seeing a movie about 30 years ago, and a guy in the movie said, he was telling his mentor, I merely do the job for the money. And the mentor said, it's the word merely, that's the problem. And the American dream, with everything I just talked about, and watching everything that's going on in the world and what I believe is forthcoming, you literally have to be asleep to believe in it. I'll talk to you later.